Episode 1, 2020 A Year in Review. The summary. The gang looks back on 2020 to justify their numerous PPE loans as they contributed to the chaos of the past political year way more than anyone could have imagined. My quick take here, and I sound ridiculous saying this, I feel like this episode was apocryphal. Like if we're watching the show as some sort of documentary on what has happened in these four people's lives, I feel like this one didn't feel real if you saw it. I'll do a breakdown in a second. It feels like, I can't explain it. It's sort of like if you like Star Trek and you watch Star Trek, the animated series, there are some episodes that could be like, yeah, that happened in real Star Trek. And there are some things like the 50-foot Vulcan that you're like, no, that doesn't work. We have to just pretend that didn't happen. That's how I feel about this episode. I was entertained, but the plots are just a step too far. We'll get into that. I also didn't love that the gang wasn't together. That was a big problem with season 13. This is season 15. 14, they got the gang back together. 13, they had a lot of solo adventures, and I really didn't feel it. This had a sense of that with 3 anthology sketches. I laughed at the sketches, but I also didn't feel it worked as a show, so I'm conflicted here. I'm cribbing off the AV Club, who writes, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia shakes the rust off in season 15 premiere. Looking back, gets It's Always Sunny off to an uncharacteristically wobbly start. The What We Did on Our Pandemic Vacation structure of 2020 A Year in Review hardly feels like the gracefully filthy re-entry into the It's Always Sunny world that fans may have been anticipating. Instead, the gang's anthology of off-year shenanigans feels rushed and a little obvious, each story in the episode's 3-part structure leaning heavily into the events surrounding a single joke, leaving precious little time for nuance. In the first segment, Mac and Dennis are wearing full government-subsidized tactical gear to harass voters outside the local polling place. They immediately get sidetracked into a debate over which Philly athlete is best. Is it Rocky Balboa or Donovan Mcnabb? Mac picks Rocky. Dennis counters because, as a non-fictional human being, Mcnabb has the edge. Mac also says that the celebrity 5'9" Stallone could theoretically have taken the Eagles to the playoffs against the weak NFC East of the 1980s. It's a sort of desperate, on-the-fly, tortured logic Mac depends on. That part was pretty funny. Then we went on to Frank's Imports and Exports. On this one, Frank is making hair dye out of Chinese motor oil. The joke is that one day Rudy Giuliani gets his hair dye from Frank, and then when Rudy in real life showed up at the Four Seasons landscaping company and his hair dye ran, that was because of Frank. And it's like, yeah, I did like how they shot it. They definitely did some Scorsese there. They did some Goodfellas pastiche. That was fun, but it was one joke, and I didn't love it. Then the third part, Dee and Charlie have decided to make masks. Dee is making masks like you wear for COVID. Charlie is making masks that you wear over your head. Pretty good joke in there about, is this a mask of Ronald Reagan or of Dennis? That made me laugh. Their company's called Garments and Varmints. The joke, their raccoon pelt outerwear became the signature costume of the QAnon shaman. Yes, they meet the QAnon shaman in a parking lot, and he wears Dee and Charlie stuff to the January 6th insurrection. And, really? It's a little too much. And I know I'm saying this about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where all kinds of ridiculous things happen. Little too much. The AV Club says, these are sketch ideas and hardly imaginative ones. Then, as if he's the avatar for the audience, the man who's there to collect on their loans says, there's no way you were all involved in every major event of last year because you're not Forrest Gump. Then we see some scenes that inserts the gang into real-life events. We see Frank at Giuliani's actual Four Seasons landscaping press conference. We see Charlie and Dee confusedly sporting their Kanye for President gear at the Capitol riots. It's all kind of The AV Club gave it a C+. That sounds about right, but on the other hand, I was laughing. Episode 2, The Gang Makes Lethal Weapon 7. Good timing here since Mel Gibson is actually making real-life Lethal Weapon 5. Incited by Frank's ire that the local library has pulled the gang's first 2 deeply unofficial Lethal Weapon sequels from the shelves, Dennis notes that he's pretty shocked the library took the films in the first place. Good joke. The gang decides the only solution is to make yet another film, and to do it right this time. The gang grapples with the changing face of Hollywood with regard to everything from blackface to cancellation to whether or not Frank really needs to perform actual on-screen hardcore penetration this time out. Mac says, Hollywood has a very clear moral code on mistakes. You get one. Dennis notes that Mac's examples of Woody Allen, Bill Cosby, and Roman Polanski show the exact opposite of that, adding, I would actually argue that these things that we're talking about, they weren't so much mistakes as they were violent sexual crimes. Mac wants credit for not doing blackface this time. He gets to direct Lethal Weapon 7. Dennis gets to preach to the others that their casting choices are drawn from the only black people they've ever really interacted with. All the people of color that we know are the people of the bridges and the streets, their pimps and their prostitutes, and that says a lot more about us than it does about them. The AV Club says, it's funny enough, I especially like when Dennis's lofty pretensions see him incorporating rhetorical flourishes like of the bridges and tunnels, but simply having the gang spell out the points the episode's striving to make in big, impossible to miss letters inviting us to laugh that the gang misses them, gets tired. There's too much ironic speechifying long after we've gotten the gag. Still, the resulting train wreck that is Lethal Weapon 7 has some funny moving parts. Mac and Dennis address the previous audience's confusion about the series emerges with first D and then Charlie's Riggs essentially doing a solo version of the Californians to explain precisely why he's late to Murtaugh's daughter's birthday party. It also continues the gang's conviction that Martin Riggs should have Gibson's Australian accent, which always makes the writer laugh. They gave that one a B-. I agree, it is the better of the two. The AV Club also has some stray observations from the pair of episodes from the first episode. Mac's questions for determining true Philly residents include, why do we hate Chris Chelios? Who's Uncle Eddie Savitz? The writer says, Google that at your peril. No, I know the answer to the first one, but let's see. Uncle, am I going to regret this? Eddie Savitz. Oh my, yeah. Ugh, no, why did I do that? I can't even. Google it yourself. But now that makes that joke a lot funnier. It's horrible, but the joke is funny. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Season 15. I'll recap it every Saturday. Follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, wherever you get your shows. See you tomorrow.